camp had barbed wire around it with sentry towers around it. And we asked, why do we have to have barbed wire and sentry towers, or guard towers as we called them? They said, well, it's for your own good and for your own safety. Well, then we asked, why are the guns pointing in instead of out? And they wouldn't give us an answer on that. The only thing I remember about Berkeley is the foghorn in San Francisco Bay, because that thing was very loud. We could hear it in Berkeley, and it was in San Francisco. But I was told that I was always sit on the stoop and talk to the people walking by. And one particular sailor would walk by and would talk with me, and his name was Bud, so my family calls me Bud.
However, the peaceful times did not last long.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air, President Roosevelt has just announced.
After the shock of Pearl Harbor, hysteria ran rampant among American citizens. As a result, America began preparing for war. Among these preparations were exclusions towards those of Japanese descent.
The Japanese people all of a sudden couldn't go to some stores for prejudicial reasons.
Despite all of the exclusions towards Japanese Americans, the United States took an even more dramatic step with Executive Order 9066.
Executive Order 9066 was issued by President Roosevelt, and that established moving the residents of California who lived in Area 1 to concentration camps, relocation centers.
The executive order's main focus was on Japanese residents. However, many Americans at the time were unaware of the extent to which the order affected Italian and German families. For example, 5,000 Germans and 3,200 Italians were arrested as a result of the executive order. More than 110,000 Japanese were moved to various relocation centers around the United States. It was in these camps that the Japanese, German, and Italian families spent the next 2.5 years of their lives. Suddenly Ron, only 3 years old when World War II broke out, and his family were uprooted from their life in Berkeley, California.
On April 2nd, we were first moved to San Fran. You could only take what you could carry. A lot of people in that time frame thought, well, are we coming back or not? They didn't tell us. So a lot of people sold their businesses, sold their refrigerators and cars and whatever they had for very, very cheap, because the people buying them knew we had to leave and they wanted to get rid of them. San Fran was a racetrack just outside of San Francisco. Many of the people had to live in horse stalls. We were fortunate we got there at a time when we could move into a barracks.
Despite Ron and his family's involuntary relocation, he always remained in good spirits and made the best of situations.
For entertainment, the 6 of us would go to the racetrack and walk around the racetrack for something to do. And I do recall one day I said, I'm kind of tired. I think I'm going to go back the other way. But we were about 2/3 of the way around the racetrack, so I walked back. And of course, everyone else beat me because they only had 1/3 of the racetrack left to walk. I got lost real easy. But I remember I was about 20 feet, I guess, from my own barracks. They all look alike. I was crying, and then I happened to look down and saw the tears were making little brown spots in the sand down below, and that kind of amused me, so I cried some more just to make more brown spots in the sand. And finally my family came along, and my brother says, see that building right there? That one's ours. You could tell because that one board is loose.
San Fran was not home for long, as it was a temporary relocation center.
When we went to Topaz, we're in a rickety train. It was really dirty. Silver poled, and we had MPs watching us so we didn't peek out the window. I don't know whether it was so we couldn't see out or other people couldn't see in. Our camp in Utah was Topaz. It was one of the 10 camps throughout the United States.
Despite all of his family's hardships, Ron's parents worked hard to maintain a sense of family unity. However, it was not always easy.
Mom thought I was too small to eat in a dining hall, so I had to stay home. and she brought the food home to us, to my brother and me, because we were the smallest ones. The rest of them were able to go to the dining hall, and they didn't sit in the family, I found out. They sat with their friends. The family unit was pretty much disturbed, and the Japanese people are pretty firm on family units.
Despite keeping the family unit together, Ron's parents let their children have some freedom in camp. This allowed Ron to have a life that was as normal as possible.
Each house, folks did whatever they did, whatever they could. They moved sand around to make little sand gardens, and they made a wooden bridge, and it wasn't just planks, it was a nice arched bridge going to the front of the dining hall to make it look as much like a Japanese garden as they could.
While the gardens made the adults feel at home, sporting goods helped the children.
We were given a lot of things for recreation. We were given baseball bats and gloves and balls to make up our little baseball teams. We would play one block against the other. Of the age group that could, us little guys, we would grab the bat and ball and throw it at each other and try to hit it.
Baseball was widely popular throughout the Japanese internment camps. It provided an escape from the stress of the situation at hand and made life seem more normal. Baseball also created a feeling of unity among the Japanese Americans.
I think I made contact one time, but I was about 4. One time my dad says, "Why don't you guys make an ice skating rink behind the barracks?" So we got busy with shovels, and we were fortunate the weather got cold enough that the ground froze, that the water didn't soak into the ground anymore, but it stayed on top. So we watered it pretty much all one day. We're using one garden hose to fill up an area that big. So it took a long time. So by the time evening time came, we had enough water in there to make ice that we could skate on it the next day.
Even with activities like ice skating and baseball, camp was no match for being at home.
Similar to Tanfran, not all of the barracks were completely built. Ron's family, along with other residents of Topaz, dedicated time to finishing their living quarters.
The barracks were 100 feet long by 20 feet wide on the outside. Of course, they're made out of 2x4, so they're a little bit smaller inside. The outside wall was 1 layer of tar paper, and the inside wall was a sheetrock that we put up, so you know it wasn't very well sealed. The roof was plywood, and the outer covering for that was tar paper. The flooring in there was pretty much like you make a patio deck, wood with a lot of space in between them. Our lighting was one 40-watt light bulb hanging in the center of our room. Our heat in there was a potbelly stove, and they were coal burning, and we had to keep them stoked ourselves. We couldn't keep it as warm as we would like to. We always had to wear our coats in the wintertime, inside and out. Our education wasn't probably as good as it would have been had we stayed in California. My teacher was a Japanese lady who was a college student, but I didn't know whether she wanted to be a teacher or not. She did the best she could under the circumstances. Our class was kind of different because our seats faced the entranceway, and our teacher would speak to 2 rooms at the same time. Somehow we did muddle through. We did have classes graduate.
On January 2nd, 1945, U.S. Major General Henry C. Pratt issued a proclamation declaring that all residents of Japanese internment camps could return home. However, this proclamation did not result in immediate action. While some internment camp residents had been encouraged to leave camp with the aid of sponsors as early as 1944, many were still in camps until the end of 1945. In fact, it was not until September of 1945 that Proclamation No. 24 was issued. This revoked all orders of exclusion against Japanese Americans.
We left Topaz, I was 6 going on 7.
The happiness many Americans felt at the end of World War II was hardly felt by the people of Japanese descent, especially those who ran into conflict while in camps. One of these being a loyalty survey. In 1943, any residents of internment camps over the age of 16 were required to answer the Japanese loyalty questionnaire. Questions 27 and 28 created the most controversy. Number 27 asked if the individual would be willing to serve in the armed forces wherever ordered. If the individual were to answer yes, they risked being separated from their family and friends. Question 28 was even more difficult to answer, as many feared it may be a trap. The question read, "Will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States of America and faithfully defend the United States from any or all attack by foreign or domestic forces, and forswear any form of allegiance or obedience to the Japanese Emperor or any other foreign government, power, or organization?"
And of course the people said no, because they had no loyalty to Japan or the Emperor. They're U.S. born, U.S. citizens, and they really didn't care about the Emperor any more than we do now. We care that he's there, and that's part of their government form, just like we care about the King and Queen of England.
Of all the Japanese that answered no to both question 27 and 28 of the loyalty questionnaire, 12,000 of them were transported to Tule Lake in the fall of 1943.
Of the 10 war relocation camps, Tule Lake was the largest. It encountered the most conflict, as it became the center for any Japanese American deemed potentially dangerous to the United States.
The camp contained 1,000 Army policemen and an 8-foot-high, man-proof fence, making the facility a maximum security relocation center. The camp was originally designed to fit 15,000 residents. Despite this limit, the facility held 18,700 prisoners. Those fortunate enough to stay in camps other than Tule did not feel so lucky when they were released from camp, only to find they no longer had a home.
There was one house that I heard about. The people went back to their address and they just found a big hole in the ground because somebody took their house. All of it. Physically took the house. Many of the people rented their houses to some people they thought they could trust, or had someone who they thought they could trust manage them. And when they got back, the place was empty. When the people moved out, they took everything with them, including all the furnishings that were left by the people who owned the house.
Fortunately, the man who sold Ron's family their house managed it while the Haranos were away in Tanveran and Topaz. After the war, Ron's family sold their house and moved to Nebraska.
A stray dog adopted us. Was a real good watchdog. And I don't know where she learned language, but we said, we're going to go to the park to play ball. And she'd go running to the park, and there was about 6 diamonds there. And I didn't know how we always had a diamond available to us until one time I saw our dog out there chasing kids off of one of the diamonds so we could play on it.
While Ron and his family were no longer in camp, the experience would always have an effect on their lives.
Anytime we asked my parents anything about camp, the first thing they would say is, what do you want to know that for? And they wouldn't answer us because they didn't want to talk about it. Walking home from school, one of the other kids started throwing rocks at me. And me not being one to run, I caught one of the rocks that was thrown at me and threw it back at him, and I hit him. When I got home, Mom told me, you shouldn't throw rocks at people, because I think she got a couple of phone calls. Some of us felt that the government did that so they wouldn't get sued. About that time, the Japanese people were able to become affluent enough that they could hire real good lawyers. That was one excuse for it. The other is, and I think the one that is probably most correct, is Daniel Inouye, the senator from Hawaii, since Hawaii was became a state, was in office, and I think he had an awful lot to do with that happening.
A $20,000 monetary apology was also given to the Japanese Americans that were placed in camps.
Was it worth it? To me, it was just a token of saying sorry, because I was so little, I didn't lose anything. But to the people who lost their farms, that was a slap in the face.
It was Ron's perseverance and his parents' reassurance of normality while in Topaz that allowed Ron to respect and even desire to serve his country, the United States, later in life.
I wanted to serve the U.S. the best way I could, and I thought my being in military service would fill part of that. We did have one man who was blind walking his dog off harness, as we say, because he just wanted to let the dog walk. He was walking in the blank space between the buildings and the fence, and he was about halfway in between there. And the guard yelled at him. He didn't understand English, so he kept moving. He didn't know who he was talking to because he couldn't see, and so he had no clue what was going on, and he was shot because the guard thought he might be trying to escape. So was it good or bad for us to be put in a camp? Was it the right thing to do? I'll leave that for you to decide.
I heard about Vet Doc my junior year, and everyone just kept saying how much time they're dedicating to the class. They say that they come in every day after school, they come in during winter break, they come in during spring break, and I didn't understand what it was about the class that made it so alluring until I saw Ron's interview. Ron experienced a sense of alienation that I will never be able to fully grasp. His own country placed him in a camp because of his ethnicity. The respect I have for him and his actions following his relocation is immense. Being able, even willing, to serve the United States after living through his experience of World War II is truly heroic. I feel honored not only to have been in his presence, but to have heard his story and been granted the opportunity to share it. I see Ron's face on my computer screen every single day at school, and I hadn't met him yet. So finally we met at the Camp Grand restaurant, and we talked for hours. I was so nervous, and it went really well. And we talked so long, we didn't realize the restaurant had closed. They were very kind. Eventually, we realized it was closed and we left. But it was a wonderful day that I will not forget. This entire class has meant so much to me. I've dedicated a large majority of my senior year to this class and making this documentary, and I can't think of a better way to have spent my time.